Clay Hammond is all dressed up for the day. He picks up his keys, wallet, and phone from a table where a book called The Words lies. He grabs the book too and adjusts his tie. An audience applauds him as he stands on the stage and begins to read the book he picked up earlier. This is a reading of the book that he wrote, and he starts with part 1. The old man stands in the rain and watches as Rory and Dora make their way to the limo. It seems as if the raindrops miss them as they drive away. The old man comes to his apartment and gets ready for bed. Rory is on the phone with his dad and conveys to his mom to not worry about him and Dora. He adds that Dora brought her camera and there are going to be a lot of pictures taken at the event they're going to. After he hangs up, he rests his head on Dora's lap and expresses his parents' excitement and love for her. He sighs because he is overwhelmed and didn't expect any of this to happen. Dora calms him down, claiming that it's just nerves because his little book has made it big after all. They arrive at the event where Rory's book called The Window Tears receives lots of praise and he gets the American Fellowship Award. The old man reads Rory's book in his room while Rory gives his acceptance speech at the awards event. On the drive back home, he feels conflicted even though he has everything he ever dreamed of. Somewhere, the old man is waiting because he'll change everything. Clay starts reading the next chapter, which is set 5 years before Rory's book is published. Rory and Dora move into a first-floor loft in an old factory in Brooklyn right after college. Rory already knows what his life is going to look like. He loves Dora, New York, and the fighting to make the rent. He lives the life of every great writer he idolizes, struggling to make his art. He is a young, struggling writer fighting to make his voice heard. He likes cheap bottles of wine and wandering around the streets to spend his days. But at night, when the rest of the city sleeps, he writes. He finishes a draft to take to an agent his professor recommended. Dora gives him a soft reminder that they don't have money, but he is optimistic that they'll figure it out. Rory goes to his father's workplace to see him and straightforwardly asks him to lend him some money. He just wants some help to cover his expenses for the next month, after which, he won't rely on his father because he got his book from an agent. He has been told that his book has potential, but that's not enough for his dad. Rory argues that his line of work is different from his father's conventional business, but his dad doesn't approve of it. He wants Rory to take some responsibility for his own life and treat writing as a hobby to get financially stable. His dad reminds Rory that he needs to earn money if and when he wants to marry Dora. Rory gets upset, but his dad finally writes him a check for the last time. His dad gives him a lesson to earn steadily and learn to accept his limitations before offering him to work there. Rory laughs at this idea and leaves. He continues to write, believing that he has a story to tell. He sends his work everywhere, but all he gets in response is rejection, disinterest, or silence. Daniela joins Clay's event and continues to narrate Rory's story. Rory is left with no choice but to take a day job. He works at a major publishing house, hoping to make some connections. His co-worker Dan claims to have joined the firm for the same reason and seems in delusion about why he hasn't had a breakthrough yet. Dan laughs when he learns that Rory writes about angry young men and estimates that he'll also move on to sci-fi by the time he gets as old as him. Without even knowing it, Rory and Dora settle into their lives and get married at City Hall on a random Friday afternoon. They go to Paris on their honeymoon, where they explore antique shops one day. Rory comes across an old manuscript in a leather casing that Dora buys for him. They return to New York when their honeymoon is over. Then, with no warning at all, Rory gets the call that he's been waiting for. His new agent, Timothy Epstein, has a reputation for impeccable taste and discovering young literary stars. He is very impressed with Rory's work but is uncertain about whether he can publish the book, because of the nature of the publishing business right now. He makes it clear that there is no market for Rory's book, which disappoints him because he's been working on it for 3 years. He faces more rejection for his book called The Burning Tree, and Dora consoles him. He loses faith in his work until one day he gets his hands on the old manuscript he discovered in Paris. He reads the first page and is compelled to not stop until he finishes the whole document. It is a gripping story that he reads until the end, and it leaves an impact on him. Rory and Dora have dinner with some friends who are also a couple. Jason and Kami want to go to the Turks on vacation with Rory and Dora in September. They're talking about chartering a boat while Rory stays quiet and Dora comes up with excuses to bail. Rory can't stop thinking about the story and where it came from. He wonders who'd written such words that showed him who he aspired to be, along with the reality of who he'd never become. He storms off from dinner and Dora follows him out into the street. He expresses his frustration at how unsatisfied he is with his life. This declaration hurts Dora, while Rory goes on to say that he isn't who he thought he was. He is terrified that he will never be the man he has always wanted to become. Later that night, he apologizes to Dora and hugs her. That night, he sees flashes from the life of the author who wrote the manuscript. He sees a young man in love, struggling with the sights of soldiers moving away dead bodies while writing to navigate through his passions. Rory wakes up in the middle of the night and goes through the script again. He doesn't know why, but he starts to copy it on his laptop. He just wants those words to pass through his fingers and mind. He retypes every word as it is written on those pages, without even correcting the spelling or punctuation. He finds an ink mark on one of the pages that has the writer's fingerprints smudged on it. He needs to know what touching greatness feels like, if only for a moment. When he comes home the next day, Dora is crying and wants to kiss him endlessly. She confesses that she has never gone through his things before, but she was working on the laptop and his book was on the screen. Only reading one sentence was enough to engross her, and she knows now that he's everything he's always wanted to be. She claims that these stories are so different from anything that he's done before, and it seems as if he has stopped hiding. She finds these words to be more honest and can see all of him in it. Rory contemplates telling her the truth that these words aren't his, but her affection makes him decide against it. She assures him that he's a great writer and urges him to show it to an agent at his workplace, for her sake if not his own. So, he ends up giving the novel to Mr. Cutler, one of the agents at his workplace. Months pass by and Rory forgets about the book by the time autumn comes around. Mr. Cutler calls him in his office, confessing that he read his novel last night. On Cutler's inquiry, Rory reveals that no one besides him or Dora has seen this novel. He adds that Dora insisted he submit this, and Cutler responds that he can't wait to meet and thank her for that. Cutler expresses his interest in representing Rory and his work as his agent. This leaves Rory with a dilemma, only he doesn't get an epiphany or signs from God to point him in the right direction. He ends up signing the contract and his book becomes a huge success. He becomes the darling of the New York literary world and gets one accolade after another. He has made his choice and then he meets the old man. As Clay gets to this part of the story, Daniela feels her heart race as she sits in the audience. Clay concludes the first part and everyone, including Daniela, applauds him. Afterwards, he signs his fans' books and Daniela approaches him. She hands him a glass of wine she knows he likes because she read it in an interview of his. Daniela seems very into Clay, who is pleasantly surprised at this opportunity. He takes her into his green room as he only has a short break before he has to read the next section. He claims that he's resting his voice, which makes Daniela laugh at him. She's not worried about their lack of conversation though, because she already knows everything about him. She follows each and every interview that he gives and points out that he's still wearing his wedding ring even though he and his wife separated. She got backstage tonight by begging her professor for a ticket because she's a grad student at Columbia. She boasts that she won the Elman Fellowship just like him when Clay is informed that his slot is about to start. Clay reads the second and final selection of the evening, which is set on a crisp and clear autumn morning. The old man is dressed exactly as he was the day before and reads the news of Rory getting the award. He stands outside Rory's building just in time for him to come out and catch the bus to Central Park. The old man follows Rory onto the bus and all the way to Central Park. The old man initiates the conversation with him and shows surprise at the fact that he's reading Fant, an underrated writer. The old man claims to have known Fant, whom he met in Los Angeles in 1958. They discuss how Fant should have gotten more recognition, but life happened to him. The old man questions him about what it's like to be known by everybody, and he admits that it's nice to have his work recognized. The old man appreciates Rory's writing as he has read his book too. He mentions to Rory that his book was based in Paris right after the war. The old man recounts relating to and living through every moment in Rory's book as if he were there. The smile on Rory's face slowly fades and he takes his leave, but the old man stops him for an autograph. As Rory signs his book, the old man reveals that he has a story that Rory might like. If the old man tells the story and Rory writes it, he might give him a little credit. Rory gets up, responding that it wouldn't be fair, and walks away. The old man says that his story is about a man who wrote a book and lost it and was later found by an undeserving kid. This statement stops Rory right in his tracks and he turns around to sit back with the old man. The old man starts to tell the story of an 18-year-old kid, a soldier who never saw any action. He was sent to Paris right after the war and only did meaningless work like cleaning sewage pipes with his comrades. But the kid was happy even though the guys in his unit were different from anybody he'd known in his neighborhood. He only saw one dead body during his time in the army, and his best friend was an intellectual. That friend got the kid into reading and he developed the ambition to be a writer. He met and fell in love with a Parisian girl. Their relationship was perfect and lovely until he got discharged from the army. He kissed her goodbye before getting on the train home. But his world suddenly seemed small in her absence because he changed in his time away. He tried to write about his experiences, but the words wouldn't come to him. He knew the life he wanted and what he had to do to get it. The young man moved back to Paris with his girlfriend and began his apprenticeship as a writer. He worked as a journalist in a weekly newspaper and learned a lot from there. He married the love of his life, Celia, and experienced the joy of being a father to his beautiful daughter. He didn't know it back then, but that was his moment. His daughter used to cry so much that at times, he could barely think, let alone write. The old man drifts into thought until Rory prompts him to continue his story. The old man elaborates that his daughter was sick and passed away while she was still an infant. Celia and him were never the same again, even though he tried to pretend. When he came home one night, Celia had left to stay in her mother's house in the country because she needed time apart to think. He lost his one mind that night and found comfort in writing. He couldn't remember sleeping or eating and kept writing because the words poured out of him. It was a stream of thought that he couldn't control or question where they came from. He finished the script in 2 weeks, which Rory couldn't achieve all his life. Then the man slept a dreamless sleep, after which, he cleaned his apartment and went to find his wife. She begged him to go back to Paris without her, and he obeyed without forgetting to leave his book behind for her to read. She kept it in a leather casing, clutching it close to her heart. She finally came home a few weeks later but forgot his script on the train due to her excitement to see him. She claimed that she hadn't read his story yet and wanted to start life over as if it was the easiest thing to do. She watched in panic as he rummaged through her luggage, desperately trying to find his book. Writing that story had saved him, but Celia failed to understand that. This bothered the young man, even though he'd regret it later. He got frantic looking for his book all over the train station. For a time, they tried to patch things up together, but they couldn't erase the past no matter how much they wanted to. For the first time ever, the young man began to long for home. This longing soon got so strong that he left Paris. He never went back to Paris or saw Celia again. But after he lost those pages, he was never able to down one word that looked right to him, maybe because he was afraid of going that deep again. He stopped trying and eventually settled down in a town up north where he found a kind of peace. Rory thinks that the old man is done with his story, but he starts the part where things get really interesting. Long after everything has faded into the past, the young man, now an old man, walks into a bookstore. He reads the blurb behind the book, which says that the author of the story is a fresh new voice who has something new to say. The old man opens and starts to read Rory's book. The narrator of the book was standing over a crib, his child was dying, and there was nothing that he could do. Rory is unable to come up with an explanation except that it is all a misunderstanding. The old man refuses to accept this lie and reclaims his words and stories blatantly to Rory. He doesn't know or care about how Rory stole his words, but just finds it important for him to know the story behind those words. The old man smiles, believing that maybe now, Rory has the idea for his next book, and leaves. Rory remains seated on that bench trying to process everything. He stays unaware of the world or time passing around him until the sun finally sets after a few hours. Rory searches for his way home, and on that note, Clay shuts his book and concludes the event. The hall erupts with applause and Daniela watches him with mesmerized eyes. Clay adds that the readers would have to buy the book if they want to know the rest of the story. After the event, a journalist questions Clay on his morality, and he tries to answer until his eyes meet Daniela across the room. Her eyes invite him over and he approaches her with some champagne. She guesses that he was drowning with the journalist, but he claims that he was completely in his element. She suggests getting out of there even though he's supposed to socialize and get his pictures taken at this event. He has the responsibility of raising all the money he can in these troubled times. She doesn't give him the satisfaction of groveling to get his company and gives up. But he switches gears instantly and agrees to keep her company and escape this event. He takes her back to his place and she is curious to check out his writing space. As she walks in his apartment, she notices how empty it is, but somehow exactly how she imagined it. He takes her jacket and she sits in his writing chair, loving the view from his desk. He goes downstairs to get her some wine while she goes through his copy of the book. She finds a photo inside and moves to the balcony while he is in the kitchen downstairs. They raise a toast to his book and she inquires about what happens to Rory after the old man finds him. He questions why a girl as beautiful and intelligent as her would like to be a writer, and she finds this hypocritical coming from a wordsmith himself. On her flirtation and insistence, he makes her close her eyes and completes Rory's story. As the sun sets and Rory gains a sense of his existence, he resorts to drinking to numb the sirens going off in his head. He almost gets run over by a cab and is so drunk that he's got his nerve. He thinks the whole matter through for the first time in his entire life and reaches the conclusion that the truth shall set him free. He staggers drunkenly into his home and gets greeted by Dora, who is chopping vegetables in the kitchen. She is excited about moving into a bigger and better apartment, but he catches her off guard by demanding to know why she loves him. She senses him being drunk and manages to respond that she loves him because of his beautiful eyes. She also points out how he is serious all the time, but is a goofball deep down, which is another reason why she loves him. She is concerned about what's going on with him and he blurts out that he is a liar. He confesses that he didn't write the book and stole it from someone else. He didn't know who he was stealing from, but he knew that the words weren't his. Dora is confused, so he explains that the opportunity was there to seize. He wanted it so badly, and the way she looked at him when she thought it was his made him convinced for a moment that he wrote it. He knows that he could never write anything that good and suspects that Dora also knew that those words weren't his. But she wanted to stay in her fantasy too, so she played along with his delusion and deception. She snaps at him, reiterating that she genuinely believed him. He follows her around the house, but she is clearly very upset with him. She feels betrayed because he lied to her and didn't consider their relationship when he did this. She decides that she can't be in this house with him at this moment and leaves. Rory discusses the matter with Cutler next, who wants to think this through. Rory explains to him that the rest of his books were original, but it was the stolen book that made him famous in the first place. Cutler calls him out by saying that he is trying to act high and mighty, but he doesn't really want to be held accountable for his actions. Rory stays adamant about wanting to get his name taken off the book, but Cutler loses his patience. He gives Rory a reality check about what the repercussions of the truth will be. He isn't willing to sabotage his career because Rory woke up one day and decided to be righteous all of a sudden. He is ready to give the old man a cut in all their loyalties and earnings, but he is not ready to jeopardize his career over this. Rory questions whether his own book is as good as the old man's words, which makes Cutler quiet down all of a sudden. Rory gets his response from his agent's silence. He goes on a walk in the park with Dora, who brings up that they have plans with his parents tonight. Rory is not in the mood for family time right now, so she volunteers to call his mother to cancel. She requests him not to let this one mistake destroy himself and their relationship. She proposes the idea of starting their family together by trying for a baby. She promises him that she won't let him break and fall apart. Rory travels up north to see the old man at his house, who isn't interested in any whistleblowing right now. He just wanted to let him know that he had no right to take over his words and life without experiencing their pain. Rory insists on making things right, but the old man dismisses him. The old man speaks up again and admits that he saw Celia one more time in his life. He was in New Jersey on a train while she stood at the station. He jumped up from his seat after seeing her from his window, but she had another man with her. She had remarried and had a son with her second husband. The young man had watched her be happy with the family she always wanted, the family they could never have together. She soon saw him afterward, but all they could do was bid farewell to each other. The old man is still broken about how things went down with Celia, but seeing her happy didn't pain him. He was satisfied to see her live a fulfilled life and is somehow content with his life too. The old man advises Rory to walk away and never look back again, and he listens. Rory makes his choice and the old man dies after some days, taking his secret to the grave. Daniela is smart enough to understand that Clay has told his story through Rory. They start to kiss, but he stops and asks her to leave. Reassessing the words of his life has revealed to him that he loves nothing more than his Dora.